Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to Monster Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure review here on the channel. And as you can see on the screen in front of you right now, today's installment is going to be taking a closer look at the new G.I. Joe Classified Series Toxo-Viper figure. So stick around, I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, ups and downs that you need to know about the Toxo-Viper. So if you've been thinking about picking one up for yourself, you'll have good, thorough information to make a purchase decision around it. I'm going to kick things off by jumping back in time and taking a look at the packaging on the day the Toxo-Viper arrived on my doorstep. Then we'll get into the figure himself, talk about the aesthetic and the visual experience, talk about the articulation and the posability, discuss the accessories and whether they're added value, and then pop him next to a couple of other G.I. Joe Classified Series figures to see how he fits in the collection. And with all that said and done, you should have plenty of information to know whether this is the guy you want to crack your wallet or purse open for. So let's get into it and let's jump back in time to visit past Chris, having a look at the box on the day it arrived. Here we go. Okay then, folks, well, here is the Toxo-Viper in packaging then, and it's the standard G.I. Joe Classified Series packaging we've seen for a while. Logo across the bottom, G.I. Joe Classified Series. It's a Cobra character, got his name in the top left corner, Toxo-Viper. Then, of course, the core windows showing off the figure and all the goodies. Then on the back, number 209 in the line, digital render showing off the figure in action, couple of breakaway windows highlighting a few key features. Thanks once again to In Demand Toys for their excellent import work for us hungry British G.I. Joe fans. Legal bollocks and malarkey across the bottom. And then the file card. Let's have a look at the Toxo-Viper information together, shall we, folks? So first up, we've got this little shield here. This is a police badge. This is a policeman shield. And this is in reference to the fact that Toxo-Vipers, as an entire group, are massive fans of the Nathan Fillion procedural drama, The Rookie. Then we got a couple of boxes on a pallet there. This is because Cobra salaries aren't great and Toxo-Vipers need to earn a bit of extra cash on the side working in Amazon warehouses. Then we've got a dumbbell here. This is because they've got a strange obsession with watching workout videos on TikTok. And then finally, a little vial there. One of the other ways they earn a bit of extra cash is by filling vials, and I'll let your imagination do the rest on that. Nice bit of artwork there on the side. Looks fine, like this one. In fact, I feel like there's been a little uptick back up in the artwork of late. The only thing I notice is that the purple's a little bit more vivid than on the figure itself. And then you got all the repeat information on the other side along with the QR code to nowhere. So there we go, folks. There's the Toxo-Viper in packaging for those who are minting box, but I'm not minting box. I'm going to get this bad boy cracked open, get good and hands-on for some man-child playtime, pose him up, take some photos, put him in some dios, get him next to some other figures out of the collection, jot down some review thoughts. So stick around. Future Chris is going to come back and share those review thoughts with you in 3, 2, 1. Phew. Okay then, folks, well, on to the aesthetic, the visual experience section of the review. And to get us started, here's a head-to-toe look of the figure as he came out of the packaging. Now, I acknowledge that the helmet is a big part of the kind of visual identity of the character, but we'll take a look at that as an accessory a little bit later on. Let's just look at the core figure for now. And it's fairly obvious to anyone who's been around G.I. Joe for some time that this is very heavily inspired by the vintage figure. So we've got the purple chemical suit with the kind of chemical suit hood on it, with the breather mask there around the mouth, just like the vintage figure. Of course, one of the key differences is that they've done some stuff making the face a bit more gnarly. We'll talk about that in a sec. The blue, the kind of turquoisey blue colour scheme with the red trimmings on the sides, again, very heavily inspired by the vintage figure, but it's not a direct replication. The vintage Toxo-Viper had full red gloves, for example, and they've made sure to put a lot more kind of depth and sculpted detail, bringing it to life in the 6-inch form. So he's got knee pads, he's got sculpted details in all his breathing apparatus, chest stuff that's going on. So let's have a closer look at this head sculpt here and look at the face in this small sort of window of space where the hood and the mask has left the nose and the eyes and the forehead revealed, and it's incredible. It's really, really good, guys. It's really, really good. So gnarly. It just tells such a story about, you know, the Toxo-Vipers and their exposure to like gross chemicals and things. Just really sells it. I mean, look at the eyes and that kind of shaded pit of the around the eyes just looks really, really incredible. And then you've got the great sculpting of the hood as well, just makes it look really authentic. Got the nice kind of creases and curves as it goes around the head there. So very into that, and it's, you know, one of those instances where it's enormously tempting to pose and display the figure without their signature helmet, which is part of the visual identity. I felt quite similar about the Frag Viper, for example, with his kind of android head. So, yeah, that's really lovely. And then you've got this neck piece in here. Now, you can pop the head off and remove that neck piece. There we are, like so. So if you really wanted to just sort of lean into the dude in a in a chemical suit, rather than utilizing the helmet. You really can. But popping it back on, you can see that the turquoise blue section at the front of this kind of net piece, which is the seal on the underside of his helmet, matches the turquoise color of the main kind of apparatus here on his vest at the front, with a little bit of a red embellishment, like a little icon here on the top, and then all the lovely sculpted details, like the piping, the breathing apparatus, the little exhaust grills and things, and little tubes all sculpted in. And you can see that those pipes come all the way around the back, and you've got the same turquoisey blue colour on the back plate as well. The body's pretty standard, got the nice texture detail, the fabric texture detail in with the creases and the sort of style and design of the chemical suit there. And then we've also got the leathery effect here on the gloves, at the top of the gloves, with the red trimmings on the back, with various kind of dials and whatnot in the mix. So still giving that little nod, that little homage to the vintage design of the figure without entirely replicating it. The body piece underneath is a slightly different purple to the arms and the legs. You can see there it's a bit of a kind of a shinier purple, whereas you've got the kind of the kind of more muted fabric textured style purple in the arms and legs. Now it's mostly covered up by the vest anyway, but you can just sort of see it poking out underneath there. And then you've got a nice sculpted belt, looks like a nice canvas belt there. Not a painted belt buckle, but it does have painted belt loops, which I'm always a big fan of. You can see it better from the back there. And actually, while I've got it around the back, you can see the texture detail in the pants, in the trousers. These are definitely reused. We've seen these a bazillion times before, with all that kind of texture detail in, and thigh pockets and whatnot. Painted knee pads there in the same turquoise blue as this kind of breather chest vest thing. And then boots, I think these are unique, interestingly kind of sculpted boots with a slightly different design in them than we've seen before. Weird little turquoise trimmings at the back in that sort of Viper style padding on the rear of his boots. The colour scheme is arguably a little bit more muted than the vintage figures, but it's been a very long time since I've seen a Toxo-Viper for realsies in vintage figure. Maybe some of the other reviewers have grabbed their vintage ones out. But it works. It definitely works. The turquoise blue, the red trimmings on top of that purple definitely gives it some shelf presence, makes it very eye-catching. And it's a figure with some lovely symmetry as well, which makes him particularly easy on the eye. So, yeah, visually speaking, the experience is really, really good. The aesthetic's great, even without the accessory embellishments that also tie into the visual identity of the character. And we'll have a look at those in a short while. So already, just like right out the gate, just the core figure is looking really, really sweet. And even the helmet, I mean, I'm seriously tempted to not bother with the helmet, because I really love this kind of gnarly looking, like a bit huffing too many chemicals, the red eyes, the kind of veiny inset eye thing that's going on looks really, really wonderful. I'm very, very into it. So I'm definitely giving the aesthetic a thumbs up before I've even slapped the helmet and the backpack on him. So there you go, there's the aesthetic, there's the visual experience. Let's now take a closer look at his articulation and posability, shall we? And just a quick note, as usual, folks, I put chapters in, I put timestamps in because, so the articulation is basically standard G.I. Joe Classified Series articulation. I know some folks are less interested in that, so you can use those timestamps to jump ahead to look at the section of the review that uses the accessories and assesses whether they're added value. However, if this is the first ever G.I. Joe Classified Series review you've ever watched, or you want to know about any particular unique quirks in the articulation with this guy, then stick around, I'll talk you through it, and we'll get started up top with the head. So the Toxo-Viper here has got a ball at the base of the skull, ball at the base of the neck. However, this neck piece restricts, gets in the way. You can do a bit of up there, and you can do a bit of forward there. And you can spin round and use the ball, but with the neck piece, and then of course once you put the helmet on top, your articulation in the head space is much, much more limited. Coming down into the shoulders, got the butterfly joint shuffling back and forth, then the peg and the hinge. You can go full 360 all the way around, and you can T-shape him out like so. Got the swivel here at the top of the bicep and tricep. You got the pinless double elbow that'll get you up to there. And it's pegged in hands, which can move at the wrist there, and both of them have got forward and back hinges, the left and the right. Although one little note, the way this little cuff piece, this little armour piece over the back of the glove there hangs over the front, means that your hinging out that way is much more limited as you come outwards, but it's all right going in. Coming down into the torso, it's the hinge and the ball joint at the waist. This vest, because of the way it's cut slightly higher, means you can get some movement out of the hinge for sure, up and down, and then you've got all your range of swivel motion at the ball joint in the waist. Standard G.I. Joe Classified Series drop-down joints at the hips and the groin, so you can come out and go forward like so. Get the Russian bally out all the way to there. Then you've got swivel here at the top of the thigh, pinless double knee that will get you up to there, boot cut at the top of the boot, and then the hinge and rockers on the feet and ankles. So yeah, the articulation is solid, thumbs up to the usual G.I. Joe Classified Series standard. Decent mover, just the main thing is the level of restriction here around the head, and it definitely gets worse once you pop the helmet on that we'll have a look at in a minute. But yeah, overall, matches what you're used to with G.I. Joe Classified. I was able to get some nice, interesting poses out of him when I was taking some pictures the other day. All fine and dandy. Very, very happy indeed. So there you go. Okay, there's the articulation then. Let's now take a look at the accessories, shall we? And to start us off, here we go, folks, the aforementioned helmet. I've referenced it several times now because it is a key part of the visual identity of the character. Unmistakable, the big Toxo-Viper helmet there. Again, very heavily inspired by the vintage design, although the colour scheme is different. It was like a reddy brown, wasn't it, this section where it's in black now. But lovely sculpted detail, really big, chunky, unique shape and size to it, with all the additional sculpted details in around the side here with the piping and the little rivets and grills. Got this red section on the front with the little breather bit there, and the yellow vines across the middle. And it sits, I don't know if you can see there, sits on top of that neck piece, so it sort of seals it up like a complete closed, enclosed, obviously protective gear. Not that you think he's getting much use out of that looking at his face. So it brings the image together there, really finishes off that Toxo-Viper look. The only thing I'll mention, as I referenced earlier, is that the head movement, the articulation is hugely limited once you've got the helmet on. You can get a bit of left and right out of it if you move the neck piece along with it underneath, but otherwise, that's it. You're largely just sort of restricted to a bit of left and right on it there. So, yeah, he looks forward, and that's kind of it. Then you got this lovely sculpted backpack, very heavily inspired by the vintage design once again, but just brought to life as a reimagining in the 6-inch form. So, like, the exhaust pipes are just kind of more amplified and more accentuated and stuff, and the sculpted details much more detailed. All told, so you got your little toxic sludge tanks at the side, you got your little rotating exhaust blades here, and then these two exhaust pipes coming down the front, and then these two exhaust pipes that angle up over the top of the shoulders. And these have got little ports in them, which we'll take another look at in a minute. And then you can see a bit more sculpted detail on the underside that you don't even see when you pegged it in. And it's a good old classic pegging system there. The peg is quite long, but it gives it enough clearance to get through the vest and into the figure there, and sits pretty nice and flush, actually. And that little curved sculpted piece at the back means it sits pretty well on the back of the figure. Lovely jubbly. Then we got his little kind of toxic sludge gun and the pipe to attach it to the backpack there. The sludge gun, again, is very heavily inspired by the vintage design weapon. Got a little peg port at the back here for plugging your tubing into, which we've seen, several times in the line now. Little sculpted details in the weapon itself across the top. Got a blast effect port, which will be important in a minute. But yeah, pretty much just a unique weapon to the Toxo-Viper. And then there's a peg on the backpack here for the other side of the tubing so that you can plug it in. And, you can spray his toxic nastiness all over the G.I. Joes. Maybe I should have rethought that sentence before I said it out aloud. And there you go, there's the Toxo-Viper kitted up with his little toxic blast gun. The rest of the accessory selection is effects. So we've got this sort of bulbous, yellowy green, gaseous blast with a thick peg here that plugs in the end of the gun. And then we've got these two little kind of gassy effects that plug into those two exhaust pipes that come over the top of his shoulders. So with it all plugged in, here's the kind of toxic blast coming out the front of the gun, and then the two exhausts giving off more toxic smoke over the top of the shoulders there, like so, which gives it a really interesting look and really adds to the aesthetic experience for sure. So the accessory selection is a bit curious with this one, because certainly the things like the blast effects make it more visually interesting and increase the shelf presence. Obviously, the helmet, the backpack, big part of the kind of personality, the character that is the Toxo-Viper, so that's all fine and dandy, adds up. And it's a great selection. Everything goes on the figure too, which is always a big plus. But I found him just a little bit difficult to pose up in interesting ways with all the gear on. because the helmet restricts the ability to turn his head, but then also these kind of front and back hinges, forward and back hinges on the hands also make it a little kind of awkward for holding the gun. I find it a bit difficult to get him looking like he's shooting in the right direction, like he's just blind blasting. Which I suppose if your specialism is just spraying toxic gas and toxic sludge everywhere, then that's not so much of an issue. But I just can't, like the arms is very difficult because of the way the forward and back hinge here is restricted by this little cuff piece, and the length of the arms and the way the butterfly joints work. I can't get him sort of holding it out front. It's probably me. If I had more patience and took more time to finesse it, I probably could get it there. But it's just something to bear in mind that it was something I was struggling with a wee bit when I was playing around with it. But he does look great, as a display piece. I mean, look at that. Just these alone just really add to the visual level of interest. The shelf presence that he generates. So the accessories are okay. I'm going to give him a thumbs up, but I don't know. Just the implementation's just a little bit squiffy. Just a wee bit squiffy in terms of how you might want a man-child play with them. So there you go. Okay, well, let's now take a look at the Toxo-Viper. Let's do a couple of other Vipers, shall we? And to get us started, actually, I'll go with not a Viper, but with Airtight here. The Toxo-Viper's foil on the side of the Joes. Here's an interesting little side note, actually. I got a message off someone the other day telling me that they find the way I pose my figures on these comparisons really annoying and to just stand them next to each other. So here we go. I'm just going to go for some very standard standing. No posing at all. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I might do a poll or something on the channel, but nonetheless, there's the Toxo-Viper next to Airtight. I mentioned the Frag Viper earlier, so, here you go. Here's the Frag Viper, another kind of very unique looking Viper with a big helmet, big shiny helmet. Here's the mainline Techno Viper. I was just thinking purple Vipers, really. But you can see that the purple tone is not very uniform, quite different between the two there. Here's the Toxo-Viper next to the Dire Viper, who's, also all about releasing dangerous, stinky gases at the enemy. And then finally, had to sneak one in that was a little bit posed here, is Iceberg, fellow Wavemate, and the next review coming on the channel. All right, then, folks, well, here's the Toxo-Viper going around on the turntable. Get a 360 look at this bad boy, and while you're eyeballing that, I'll offer up some final thoughts. And really, yeah, it's a good, solid, interesting Viper. They have brought to life the vintage design of the figure in an interesting way. It's not wildly reimagined. Oh, hang on, I've just noticed that that's all a bit squiffy. Let's straighten that up. There we go. Yeah, it's not wildly reimagined, particularly, but it's got some extra depth, some extra touches. It's brought to life a bit more in what they can do in the 6-inch form. But it's fun. I mean, the profile underneath this helmet alone has sold me on it. In fact, I've been displaying it on my shelf without the helmet on more than I have with the helmet on because I really love what they've done. I've took this great picture of him filling up his backpack tanks from a sludgy chemical drum, which I love. It's not that great a picture, but I love it. So, yeah, it's a good, solid Toxo-Viper. Nothing more, nothing less. And for that reason, yeah, it's a thumbs up. I'd recommend this one for sure. It's a really interesting army builder. It reminds me of some of the comic book scenes that I love from later Real American Hero. So it's all adding up. It's all adding up. I wouldn't say it would be my first purchase out of the wave. I think I've enjoyed Mistress Armada a little bit more. And I'm into Synapse, but I realise that that's like the Marmite figure. But it's good. It's solid. Yeah. Very enjoyable figure, all told. So, yeah, go for it, guys, if you like Toxo-Vipers. All right, well, there we go then. There's my review. I hope you found that useful. I hope it's helped you make a purchase decision if you've been thinking about picking one up. If it has helped you out, do me a favour, hit all the YouTube buttons that help a toy tubing brother out. Otherwise, all that really remains to say is thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great week. And do me a favour, folks, swing back around for another video sometime again soon. It'd be my pleasure to have you. All right, take it easy now. Ta-ra!